Alright, everybody, for today's industry insight, we're going to be discussing some of the recent arguments over using historical accuracy as a valid criticism over decisions when it comes to representation in video games. Now, the incident that kind of kicked this off was from Battlefield 5's trailer from a few weeks ago, when EA revealed in the opening scene that they were going to feature a female British soldier with a prosthetic arm, and that she would be enduring like the major conflicts. There's a lot of explosions, stuff along those lines. And a lot of people kind of raised a fuss over it, saying that there weren't any female soldiers on the front lines from a British point of view. Obviously, there have been Russian snipers. And it caused a lot of arguments over people saying historical realism should be respected and be the main focal point for any game that takes place during a specific time period or event. And a lot of people have come out against that, with EA doing a recent piece saying that they don't care about people using historical accuracy as a valid defense. And speaking to a friend about this for a few hours, a few days ago, I have to agree with EA and with the defenders of it, or defenders of having this representation. And let's get things out of the way right here and there. Battlefield was never historically accurate. It took place during a period in history, it featured historically accurate weapons and vehicles, but that game was not historically accurate. It was mostly about the gamifying of combat. Again, characters running and jumping out of a flying plane to kill a guy to land in another plane. And I know what people are going to say down below. That is, well, obviously the developers had to take some liberties to make the gameplay interesting and engaging. But that's kind of the big point. When it comes to historical accuracy in a video game, it's not something you can really cherry pick. It's black or white, on and off. You can't hold up one element being historically accurate and have all the craziness over here. This is where we get to some of the best examples of ludonarrative and ludomechanical dissonance. Such as if you say your fantasy game or your game taking place in the medieval period is realistic, in the same breath that you have magic potions, wizards, and dragons flying around. Now, ultimately, when it comes to representation, or when it comes to making your game as widely appealing as possible, it's all based on one very special word, and that's playability. And at the end of the day, any good game designer who wants their game to succeed understands that playability trumps everything else. It trumps realism, it trumps historical accuracy. It's all about making the player, or making the game experience as appealing as possible to as many people as you can. Whether that's simple things like UI elements, using easy to identify symbols, making your control scheme feel right, having subtitles, colorblind modes, etc., or opening your game up to being more inclusive towards other races, nationalities, and genders. And going back to the previous point, historical accuracy does have a valid element to it, but it's a very niche case that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But ultimately, if you want your game to succeed, it's about making it as appealing as possible. And whenever we discuss about historical accuracy versus gameplay, I always go back to a discussion that Sid Meier had in the manual for Sid Meier's Pirates, the second game. In the developer diary, he discussed the team spending a lot of time arguing over whether or not to include scurvy in the game. Scurvy, of course, being the disease that killed a lot of people during the Age of Sail. When you're traveling on boat for long periods of time without getting access to vitamin C, it can be fatal. And that's obviously a realistic element. If you're going to do a game about piracy and sailing during the 18th century, or I think maybe even a little bit before that, you should include that. But during the design part of the game and playtesting, they figured that scurvy wasn't really adding anything. It was simply something that would hamstring the player. It would make the game less interesting to play. It was just more or less a negative element. So, in the purpose of making the game more fun and more playable, they removed it. And nobody really complained about it because the gameplay basically survived without needing that negative element to it. And that's the big point about this whole argument over historical accuracy. If you're going to do historical accuracy, it's not something you can cherry pick. You can't say, well, we can't have women on the front lines because that's not historically accurate, but in the same vein, allow people to take 5 to 10 bullets to the chest, have prestige modes, leveling up, all the craziness with the vehicles, and so on. And one of the things that we're seeing as a major trend, as evident by Battlefield 5 and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, with having primary male and female characters to choose from, is that developers have realized that being inclusive is a major marketing point. Now, with that said, though, the pessimist in me does kind of think that they are doing this kind of as a way of marketing their game, saying, hey, look, we have women. See, there's women here. Do you notice we have a female character? There she is. There she is. But with that said, it is ultimately a net positive. Because if it can normalize featuring female leads in video games, whether it's something like Battlefield, Assassin's Creed, or even the lesbian scene in the Last of Us 2 trailer, it will make it easier to tell these stories or allow these options going forward. A few years ago, there was a lot of argument raised over, I believe it was Dontnod, the developers behind the last Life is Strange and Remember Me, how they had to fight to have their main character in Remember Me be a female character. And we see the same thing in smaller teams as well, with the whole idea of publishers saying, at least at that time, that a female lead wasn't marketable. And now, today is a far different story. And I'm willing to bet that as we get closer to the releases of Battlefield and Assassin's Creed, you are going to see those female characters be advertised predominantly. It's a marketing dream right here. People want their games to be more inclusive. Look at us. Look at this. We accidentally said women were too hard to animate a few years ago. Look here. See what we got now. And if this opens up the doors to allow more characters and more diverse people to be the leads, definitely 2 thumbs up here. Now, as I said a few minutes ago, there is a time and a place for historical accuracy to be a valid defense. And that is when we're talking about heavily simulated elements based on heavy simulations based on real life events or situations. I'm talking grognard level rivet counting games. So war games like Steel Panthers, Corson Pocket, Gary Grisby's World War. I don't play too many war games, so my only examples are at least 5 to 10 years ago. But I'm sure you guys have better, more up-to-date ones. But in those games, when we're talking about simulating a real battle with the actual number of people, taking it all the way down to the exact turret rotation speed, accurately modeled for every tank, then you can certainly say that if women weren't featured in this battle, we're not having any women in this game, period. Because you can now use historical accuracy there. But the point is, whenever you make decisions like this, it is always going to lead to more of a niche experience. And war games, despite their very hardcore, enthusiastic fan base, is still a niche game. While titles like World at War, Corson Pocket, and again, other examples that you can think of, were popular among their respective fan bases, they were never going to earn Battlefield or Call of Duty numbers. It's just not possible. And that's why the best developers will always favor playability above all else. Because if it means attracting a new fan base or growing the market, why the hell not? And with Assassin's Creed Odyssey in particular, this was one thing I was talking to my friend about, that it is a very big deal for a narrative-focused game to have 2 different lead characters. Because normally when we discuss narrative-driven titles like The Witcher, Uncharted, Tomb Raider, and so on and so forth, or even previous Assassin's Creed games, they use the primary character as the audience's point of view, and everything is built around that character. So if you're telling the story of, I can't even think, Ezio from Assassin's Creed 2, it doesn't make sense to feature somebody else because, well, that character is not the same. But design the game from the ground up to allow for two different stories based on two different leads, that's a very big deal. And if this could be the start of allowing the option in the future, that could be a very interesting thing to look at in the coming months or years. Maybe in a few years from now, a Mario game will simply allow you to just flip the roles. Mario gets kidnapped by Bowser, let Peach do it. Let Zelda go after Link, or let Link go after Zelda. But give the options for whatever people want. Because it shouldn't be that big of a deal and that much of a hurdle to do this, especially when you think about this stuff from day one. And as we've seen over these last few weeks with these trailer reveals and so on, more and more developers are thinking about this stuff right from the onset. And again, if the gameplay still remains great, and if it does allow for more people to enjoy these titles, ultimately it's going to be a win-win. And if you don't like that, well, again, as most people say, if you don't want that in your game, then just don't play it. But as we've said before, when it comes to historical accuracy, you can't cherry pick it. Just as people argue that there can only be male leads in a fantasy situation, you can't now say, well, there can't be women, or you can't have a female lead. That's not historically accurate. Because again, it all comes down to one way or the other. And for myself, I am more than happy with playing anyone of any gender, sexuality, nationality, you name it. But with that said, we're going to wrap things up for today's Industry Insight. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a great night. Before we get to the credits, I just want to give a quick shout out to the fans and supporters over on patreon.com/GWBycer. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. If you'd like to suggest games for me to cover or topics to talk about, let me know in the comments below. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on design, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the Game Wisdom Patreon, you can find us on there on patreon.com/GWBycer. $1 will get you into our private Discord channel where we talk game topics and more. $5 will get you voting privileges for any major event, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag, Patreon-funded goals, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy more videos here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.